I am delighted to be here today to talk to you about generations in the workforce and what does that look like. Excuse me. We have a full agenda of items that we will be covering today. I want to get into defining what exactly does this multi-generational workforce look like. I will do some explaining of each of the generations and things that make them who they are, shape who they are. So begin elevating your generational awareness. And then we'll talk through the challenges and the commonalities that sometimes we forget because we're human. And then some strategies that you could take away today and implement right away. But I want us to seek out this shared understanding of what each of these generations are and what each of us contribute in the workplace. In 2003-ish is when I began my journey into diving into the generational understandings. And there was a book called When Generations Collide. I didn't think there was a better title than Collide when I found this book in 2003. And it was written from a baby boomer and millennial, and I think they had a Gen X in there, but the millennial was pretty young in their career, giving us some ideas about how we do clash. And the great part about that book is the rest of the title is When Generations Collide, who they are, why they clash, and how to solve the generational puzzle at work. This began my journey into what I'm presenting to you today, along with current information about the generations in the workforce. Listen, it's a complicated puzzle. If it was an easy button answer, we wouldn't need any type of session like this one. But people are complex. We have a lot of things going on. We've got nurture, we've got nature, we've got life, we've got all of these things. So what we're going to do is really get into understanding more about ourselves as generations and how we can work together. I think this is an exciting presentation to be part of, but I want to drive home a few points why I think you should be excited about this presentation. We're going to have enhanced collaboration and innovation when we begin to develop an understanding about different generational perspectives and how that can lead to those innovative solutions. Improved communication. Different generations, we may be speaking what we think are different languages, but they're different words that mean kind of the same thing. But we may get into that tunnel vision of what we think it means, and that can be a misunderstanding by a different generation. So we want to improve on any of those misunderstandings and create workplace harmony. I know it sounds like rainbows and unicorns, and it totally can be. And then better employee engagement. Listen, when people feel heard, seen, validated, when we start to learn what motivates each generation, we can begin having a more engaging, satisfying work environment for all of us. And then there's definitely a strategic advantage. We can harness the strength of this diverse workforce when it comes to all the generational things that we bring, and it gives us a competitive edge in the market. I'm going to bet that any patients that we are all taking care of, they come from different generations as well. So this can be used in work, it can be used with your peers, it can be used outward facing as well. So we'll understand the unique traits and the values of each of the generations, and that will help us as individuals really appreciate that rich tapestry of skills, experiences, and viewpoints that each of these cohorts bring to the table. So we want to discover the strengths of the generations. We are going to bridge some gaps with practical tips for building bridges and generational fostering of a more inclusive workplace. And then we'll look at future trends, insights into what's going on in the workforce, how it's evolving, and maybe what we can expect in future generations. But what even is a multi-generational workforce? This is a time when we have 5 clearly defined generations at the same time in the workforce. It's the first time this has happened. These cohorts, they typically spend multiple decades, and it includes individuals who have grown up during different time periods, having their own unique cultural set of circumstances, social contributions, economic influences. But we can find employees from the traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. We'll get into describing each of these. This is a relatively new phenomenon. The dynamic results from having an increased life expectancy. People are living longer. People are waiting to retire. So we've got these elongated retirement plans, and that could be for a multitude of reasons. It could be financial. It could be, I don't want to stop working. Some of these generations that are older are really, they feel very defined by their work, so they want to keep working. We also have early entry of younger generations into the workforce that is coming into play here as well. The oldest members of the Alpha generation are a few years away from entering the workplace, but their influence is already being considered and how that may shape our future work trends. So this is an unprecedented mix of generations bringing diverse experiences, perspectives, and work styles that create both challenges and opportunities for us in managing a multi-generational workforce. Now, I want to break down the population numbers for you. When we are looking at this, these are roughly the numbers that make up the generations. Baby boomers, they were the largest generation on history, and Gen X was the smallest generation in history. Millennials have bypassed the boomers as being the largest generation. And then Gen Z, they have had technology their entire lives. It is very interesting how that comes into play. I am a person who I like to see the numbers behind it to make it easier for me to look at. So I created this slide to give you the actual age ranges of each of those generations. It just helps frame each of these generations for us. And you can see that Alpha generation is still growing, but we're going to talk in these traditionalist, baby boomer, Gen X, millennial, Gen Z, and Alpha buckets. But I want you to be aware that there is something called a cusper, and that's someone who straddles between two different generations, and they may carry some of those experiences and characteristics with them because of where they stand in history. And typically it's a 5 to 7 year gap in between the years of the generations. So as I'm describing some of these, some of you may be thinking, you know, I carry some of that. I experienced some of that. And I'm telling you, it definitely has an influence on your worldview and maybe even how you approach life and work. But I will talk specifically about these categories as we go through our time together. So in today's diverse workforce, understanding the characteristics and the values of these different cohorts, excuse me, is crucial for fostering effective communication, collaboration, and productivity. So we've got the 5 distinct workforces, or excuse me, generations in our workforce, and every one of us has our unique cultural things that have shaped us along the way. We're going to get into understanding what each of these are by starting with the traditionalists. Before I start describing this, I want to give you a layout of this slide. Every single slide will have the name of the group on the top, the years that they were born, the number in the population, their age, and what percent of the workforce they currently make up. All right, so traditionalists. Traditionalists have a deep respect for authority, such as parents, teachers, leaders in society, and they often exhibit a very strong sense of patriotism, national pride, and loyalty. They have lived through periods of significant national challenges, such as wars and economic hardships. Formality and politeness is something that I would anticipate receiving from someone in the traditionalist generation, and they tend to adhere to those social norms, the etiquette, the manners, valuing politeness and respect in interactions with other people. There's a lot of alternative names that this generation may have. Silent generation, the greatest generation, veterans, the lucky few, builders, maturists. They had some defining events that really revolved around wars. So they had first the Great Depression, major economic downturn that shaped their frugality, resourcefulness. World War II, many served in the military or were affected by that wartime hardships and the rationing, post-war baby boom, economic growth and the rise of suburban living. And then government policy started to change, and Social Security and Medicare programs were provided as a safety net as they entered retirement age. Typically, characteristics are valuing discipline and loyalty, very hardworking. They're known for their dedication to work and often go above and beyond with their duties. They value punctuality, reliability, and perseverance, and they are loyal to their employers. They may stay at one spot for their entire career. Not uncommon to have a 50-year career somewhere. They do prefer hierarchy. They like that structure because they tend to respect, as I said when we started, they respect all of those leaders, people that they deem in leadership roles. So they do prefer hierarchy. They do defer to authority. They will be comfortable with very clear lines, and they do expect respect for seniority and position. They have so much wisdom. They have a lot of experience that they can base their knowledge on, and they place a high importance on experience and wisdom. And they are great at mentorship. They're willing to mentor younger employees, sharing their extensive knowledge and expertise. We all have media influences. This generation had radio, that was their primary source of entertainment, newspapers and magazines that included information about culture, cinema, golden age of Hollywood, iconic films and stars. Advertising was a really big deal to this generation. It became a very powerful tool for shaping consumer behavior. It was print media, radio broadcasts. I don't know if anybody has seen A Christmas Story, Drink Your Ovaltine. That was geared towards this generation. And then later, television commercials came into play as well in shaping what our desires and preferences should be based on consumption patterns. There was a lot of political propaganda and also lots of work being done with literature and journalism. It really shaped the societal issues, historical events, and any cultural shifts that were happening. This is a resilient and loyal group of individuals. The frugality from this group, traditionalists would not finance a home. They would save all of their money and then go buy a home. There was no going to the bank and getting a loan and doing those things. They lived through a time, the Great Depression, where resources were incredibly limited. Rations, food rations, so they're resourceful. This group also tends to have a really strong tie to the community. It could be civic organizations, their religious groups, or neighborhood activities. And just like all of the rest of our generations, everybody has some negative perceptions wrapped around them. One of those may be that this group is resistant to change. They don't want to see technology. They don't want to change. They lack flexibility. They're overly cautious. Let's just plunge in there. It makes them uncomfortable. Think about all the things that shaped them, that got them here. In a nutshell, this is our traditionalists, 1% of the workforce. Next, we have our baby boomers. Again, one of the largest generations in history. This group led us to significant cultural and social change and impact through the activism. Many boomers were involved in social and political movements of the 60s and 70s, like the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the feminist movement. There are a lot of concerns about retirement with the baby boomers. They're reaching retirement age, and this concern is growing, and they're thinking about their savings, their healthcare costs. What am I going to have for Social Security? Cultural influences had a tremendous impact on this group. So there was music that shaped this group, fashion, art, entertainment, lots of different names for this group, like boomers, post-war generation, Woodstock generation, the Love generation, Me generation, and Generation Jones. Post-war prosperity was an amazing time for the boomers because there was a lot of economic growth going on. There were higher education rates, and we began to see the rise of the middle class. People were moving more to the suburbs, and then we had all of these classisms going on. The civil rights movement was a major shaper for the boomers. This was an incredible time for the fight for racial equity. And they had the anti-war movement and the feminist movement happening at the same time. Vietnam War, there was a lot of social turmoil during that with many boomers. Either they were serving or they were impacted by somebody who was serving, or they were protesting against it. And the moon landing, that is a really big deal. It's a landmark achievement in science and technology. People were transfixed to their televisions. This generation also values hard work and dedication, long hours. You've got to be seen to know that you're doing the work because you got to put in the hours. Remember, this was an extremely large generation, very competitive, highly focused on career advancement and achievements. So they're pretty ambitious. They take their work responsibilities very seriously. They are also loyal to employers. So they will be loyal to an employer and colleagues. They may stay at an organization for their entire career as well. They're also optimistic. Generally, they have a positive outlook on the future because of the things that they saw during social change, believing in the potential for social improvement. And they had consumer confidence. This is where the keeping up with the Joneses, I'm sure we've all heard that. That's why the Generation Jones is in here. This generation was really comfortable with consumption, consumerism, and the idea of working towards a better life. It's kind of where the American dream sort of came from, and that was through advertisement. Television was introduced, cultural touchstones with shows like I Love Lucy, the Ed Sullivan Show, which premiered music, rock and roll music, with Elvis Presley, that it was like, people were so ashamed that Elvis Presley was on the Ed Sullivan Show, shaking his hips like he did. Wow, how things have changed. The Beatles, Bob Dylan, Rolling Stones, Woodstock. This is a soundtrack of a baby boomer's life. Movies, switch from cinema to movies. We had a silver screen continuing with blockbusters like Casablanca, Gone with the Wind, The Godfather, and then Star Wars in the late 70s. Advertisement really came of age during the 1960s and 70s. This is where this generation was exposed to alternative media outlets that challenged the mainstream narrative. So there's a lot of underground newspapers, independent magazines, radical radio stations. These were platforms that just started coming out for dissenting voices and alternative viewpoints. This is a very hardworking and ambitious group. They are adaptable. They are adapting to the technological changes that are happening. There are a lot of baby boomers who are taking care of aging parents while they may still be taking care of kids that are in college. So they're straddling both of those roles, and maybe they want to retire, but they can't retire because they have to take care of aging parents and they're still taking care of perhaps children. This group values relationships. They value collaboration, loyalty. They do respect the hierarchy, the chain of command, and they like very clear roles. Who's in charge, who's doing what, who's responsible for what, who will be held accountable. Negative perceptions, workaholics. If you're not working, what are you even doing? Resistance to feedback can be seen as, I don't want to hear what you have to tell me. I want to stick to the traditions and the way that we've always done things, and a sense of entitlement. Sometimes they are perceived as having a sense of, I earned this and I've got the significance from it, and I'm going to use my influence. And there are still folks who think baby boomers are reluctant to technology. We've got to stop thinking in these ways and just recognize that this was a huge generation. They had to work a lot because everybody else was working a lot. And if we didn't work a lot, we might miss out on an opportunity. So some of the traditionalists, some of the baby boomers were raising Gen X. This is the smallest generation in history. It is often described as a bridge between the baby boomers and the millennials. And there are some unique characteristics for this group as well. This group has a lot of different names. The bridge generation, post-boomers, latchkey kids. That is a highlight on, this is the first generation of children who were coming home from school to empty houses because both parents had to work. The lost generation, this is a nod to often overlooked status between the baby boomers and the millennials. 13ers, because this is the 13th generation since the American Revolution. The slacker generation, MTV generation, baby busters, sandwich, because this group is also caring for aging parents while raising their own, sometimes small children, and Zennials. Those are on the cusp between the Gen X and the millennials. Some defining things for this generation is the Cold War. There was a constant threat of nuclear war, political tension, fall of the Berlin Wall, symbolizing the end of the Cold War, the rise of personal computers. That was something that was new. It was the first time seeing computers in workplaces, in homes, and in schools. And the AIDS crisis. It was a major public health crisis that significantly impacted this society. This group tends to be distrusting of authority or skeptical in many ways, because this generation watched the baby boomers, the older baby boomers, and some of the traditionalists absolutely lose their entire retirement when Enron fell. And so this group will be loyal to their peers and their supervisors, but not necessarily to an organization. This group is independent and adaptable. They had to learn about self-reliance on their own. I've often heard Gen Xers say, yeah, I was raised by water hoses and my bicycle. So they would leave in the morning on their bike and they'd be gone all day long, come home to a to-do list. Latchkey kids, cook dinner for the family. They had the keys to the castle at 10 years old. Work-life balance is really important to this group. having that balance between the two, but they really would prefer have work, clear cut, have life. Cable television, MTV, Happy Days, The Brady Bunch, these are all shows that had an impact on this generation. And there is quite the span of music. Punk rock, new wave, alternative rock, bands and artists like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Madonna, Michael Jackson, Public Enemy. That is the soundtrack of this generation's life in their formative years. Cult classics for movies, Breakfast Club, Dirty Dancing, Goonies, E.T. In print, the Gen X had movie posters hanging all over their walls from things like Teen Beat. And then the internet and technology were just coming on the scene during the formative years of Gen X. So this generation was among the first to embrace and adapt to digital technology. And video games had a pretty big influence on Gen X. So there was Atari and Nintendo, Pac-Man, Space Invaders, Miss Pac-Man. Some notable traits, entrepreneurial. That should not come as a surprise given the fact that they felt like they have been on their own since they were quite young. You'll find a lot of people doing freelance careers in this generation. They're willing to take risk. Digital pioneers, loyal but pragmatic. Again, they're not as loyal to an organization as a boomer or as a traditionalist, but they will typically stay with an employer a little bit longer than the millennials. And cynicism, skepticism, disengagement, work-life balance, extremism, and individualism are all negative perceptions of this generation. Again, being shaped by all of these things that I just talked about, it shouldn't come as a surprise that some of that exists in this group. Gen X is often overlooked. People talk about boomers, like what I said, my kids always say, okay, boomer. I'm fine if they forget my generation, it's all good with me. And that leads me to millennials. Listen, this group was born during the peak of internet and technology. This group is passionate about social and environmental issues, seeking out ways to make a positive impact on the world. This group can really embrace flexibility. They value it in all aspects of their life, whether it's their career, living arrangements, or relationships. They are more open to non-traditional paths and arrangements. So they may be called Gen Y, Echo Boomers, Generation Next, the Net Generation, the Peter Pan Generation, Generation Me, the Trophy Generation, the Connected, and the Boomerang. The things that shape this group are the 9/11 terrorist attacks. That was a defining moment. Lots of folks in this generation can remember where they were when that happened. The Great Recession that happened between 2007 and 9, it affected jobs, prospects, financial stability, the rise of the internet and social media. I mean, we've got a digital revolution explosion of social media platforms. And the election of Barack Obama, he was the first African-American president, and that was a significant moment in US history. This group tends to be collaborative. They value teamwork. They like that collaboration work more than they do the hierarchy. They're tech savvy. Again, first generation that grow up with the internet and digital technology, and they're highly adaptable. It's a valuable trait as we rapidly evolve in industries and workplaces with the technology and with all of the things that constantly are changing in our workforce. So media influences, of course, internet revolution, social media, MySpace, YouTube, Twitter, now known as X, Instagram, later on with Snapchat and TikTok. Reality TV, oh my goodness, shows like The Real World on MTV, Jersey Shore, Survivor, American Idol. These emphasized real life drama and gave them personal stories that resonated deeply with this generation. 24/7 news. Think about that. Something we probably all take for granted, but this group absolutely was exposed all day, all night, anytime they wanted it, online. They were always more informed because the access was there, but they also become more skeptical and critical of the news. Music was streaming. I don't know if anybody remembers Napster. We had MP3s. We had Apple Music, Spotify. Those are the ones that are most recent. but there is an eclectic collection of music that resonate with the millennial generation. And they really like user-generated content, YouTube, Tumblr, uh, creating their own personal branding through social media. It's a little bit hard to advertise to this group because of all of these different we have influencers. They have a really big impact on items that our millennials are looking at. There's a lot of online communities and forums, and it's like Reddit is one of them, and it provides spaces for millennials to connect over shared interests, and you can really get a sense of belonging. You can learn about things. It's collectively identifying information that transcends geographical boundaries. That's something so unique about this generation. The world became a lot smaller place with the internet. Tech savviness and collaboration. This group is also highly educated. This group may have multiple careers. So go to school, maybe major in business, do that for a while, decide, you know what, I think I want to go into healthcare, go back to school, get their RN, do that for a while and say, you know, I think that I want to be a dental hygienist, go back to school, get the education, multiple careers. When boomers would stay at a company, Gen X would get all of the skills that they could and take that with them when they left the organization. This group, they have multiple careers, portable careers, multiple careers. That is a difference. They tend to be really creative and open to new ideas. And I'll tell you what, millennials need to have a purpose. They are very driven by purpose in their work. They do prefer flexible working arrangements for work-life integration. Can work from anywhere. You don't need to see me to know I'm working. And diversity and inclusion is very important to the millennials. They promote that practice to ensure various perspectives and backgrounds are represented. Now, some negative things that we hear about millennials. They just want to be the CEO tomorrow. This huge sense of entitlement. Narcissism, just accused of being narcissistic and overly focused on self-promotion, especially through social media. Dependence on technology, and lack of loyalty because they're perceived as less loyal to employers with a tendency to job hop. We have to reframe that. It's not job hopping. If this group does not feel like a purpose, a sense of purpose, they're not going to stick around. This is how they are wired. And I've had a lot of people say to me over the years, well, those millennials, they just think that they should have everything handed to them. And I've also heard things like, I had to work to get here, so do you. Nobody's saying you don't have to work. What we're saying is, who raised them? That's what I'm saying. Who raised them? Everybody gets a trophy. Yeah, well, who did that? It wasn't them. Somebody along the lines had an influence on that. So this is not an entitled generation, and they are not narcissistic. They've watched things before their generation that have impacted them, that have shaped how they look at everything. And then our youngest generation in the workforce is Gen Z. This is the I generation. Digital technology, everything has been around for them since they were in the womb. They may be called post-millennials, centennials. That's referring to their status as the first generation in the 21st century. Homeland generation, 9/11. They have, listen, school shootings off the chain with this group. There is a very big effort in safety, focusing on safety in schools, check all your exits when you're at the mall, always know where you're at, keep your head on a swivel. This group has had to be more aware of their situational safety than any other group before them. They are digital natives. They are so comfortable with technology. From a young age, they may have had the iPad or the tablet where they could pick the colors and do the things. They could be called Zoomers also. This is an informal name for them that's derived from Gen Z itself and Generation Tech. Defining events are the smartphone revolution. They have everything. Social media dominance. The COVID-19 pandemic. Some of these kids started kindergarten wearing masks. And that has an impact on what we're seeing now as far as reading comprehension goes, because as you're learning to read, you look at people's faces and you look at their mouth as they're talking, along with the expressions to kind of figure out what's being shared. And they didn't have that. So we're seeing some of these kids that are having a really hard time with the comprehension. That comes from this. Climate change. This group, they are activists and they are so aware about the environmental issues that are going on. They will change the world. They're digital natives. Diversity and inclusion, it's not an effort. It just is. It's always been there. It's in every aspect of their life. They also are inclined towards entrepreneurial and innovative solutions, and they're very socially aware. Memes and viral content, man, that describes this generation in a nutshell. Those are cultural touchstones for them. They use humor and shared experiences to communicate and build community. User-generated content, again, is really big for this group. And streaming services, Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu. That's how this group watches TV. Smartphones, mobile apps, you've got a computer in your hand. Social and political activism, digital communities, but this group is also highly concerned about privacy. They are heavily engaged in digital media. They're also very aware of the privacy issues that are happening, more so than previous generations. So they're aware of the data security and they take steps to protect their personal information online. They're pragmatic. They are very financially cautious because they have witnessed so much instability during their formative years, which has led them to be highly educated in finances. And then this group, we can thank them for the raise in mental health awareness. This group makes talking about it normalized. They discuss and prioritize their overall well-being, including their physical and mental health. And just like the rest, we have some negative perceptions. They have a short attention span. They're over-reliant on technology. They're impatient, and they have a lot of social anxiety. Well, you know, in the digital days, when you can have literally anything in your fingers within a click of an enter button, I can understand how that might be perceived as impatient. Everything is like this all of the time. And you know what? Maybe they do have higher anxiety, or perhaps we're just now talking about it. It's reframing how we look at the things. And I do want to talk about the alpha generation real quick. They are not in the workforce, but I know many of us are raising them. This generation they've been exposed to diversity and inclusion, different viewpoints since they were born. They definitely are digital natives. They are, it's called screenagers, cyborg generation. They've got more AI, virtual reality than anybody before them. The advancements in technology, the global pandemic, again, has a huge impact on this group. Climate change and environmental activism are things that we expect to come out of this group. They will be tech integrated, like everything in their life revolves around technology. So they're early adopters. They are going to be health conscious. Mental health awareness will still be there. A greater awareness and openness will remain. They are influenced by the access to tablets, interactive devices, the influencer culture, streaming services, augmented reality, and virtual reality, and short form content. If you think about the TikToks or you think about the Reels, those are just little pieces, but you can use that to string it together and learn. That's one way that this group is going to learn. The education focus for this cohort and interconnectedness. So they're highly connected globally through that digital platform. What we are anticipating as negative perceptions are overdependence on technology, reduction in attention span, and lack of interpersonal skills. This group may want instant gratification. Because there is a lot of time spent behind the screens, we might have to do a little bit more work on that interpersonal skill level when this group starts entering the workforce. But again, we're a few years away from that. But just to give you an idea about what kind of kids we may be raising, we have challenges, commonalities, and strategies in place. Whenever we have multiple generations in the workforce, we're going to have communication gaps. We're going to have varying work styles like work from home, work from anywhere. You've got to be in the office 8 to 5. I mean, there's all of these competing ways of doing work. Technology, we might have different expectations in our workforce. What's important to someone who is in a Gen X career versus a Boomer career versus a Gen Y, very different. the generational stereotypes, what is motivating us. These are all things that can have an impact on us in our workplace. But the top 5 challenges are listed there on your screen. So when we have a different priority for each generation, if we think about millennials, boomers are striving for that job security, where millennials want career progression, and Gen Xers prioritize that work-life harmony and financial security. When it comes to communication, boomers want that face-to-face, while millennials and Gen X typically prefer digital. Send me a text, give me an email. So these are the top 5, and I want to get into a few things that we can work on as far as strategies go. So when we are looking at the varying priorities, this is what's important to each of these generations. Respect for authority from the traditionalists. The baby boomers, they're seeing more increase on work-life balance. And now they're at a point in their careers where they may be willing to sacrifice a little bit of their career so that they can have some of that, because taking care of those aging parents. Gen X, opportunities for professional development. Millennials, again, that purpose-driven. They've got to be able to tie it to their own personal values. Gen Z, meaningful and purpose-driven work as well, with an emphasis on mental health and well-being, having that balance. When it comes to our communication and we look at this screen, if it's engagement, write a letter to a traditionalist, pick up the phone for a baby boomer, send an email or a text to Generation X. You can send a text or use social media to reach out to millennials. And Gen Z, just contact them on their mobile device, whatever it is, iPad, tablet, phone. When it comes to communication, traditionalists do like a one-on-one, face-to-face, so do boomers. Boomers also like a phone call and becoming more and more comfortable with that email. Gen X, you can email or text again. Millennials are like, I'm online and you can get me on my phone. And Gen Z, just hit them up on a Zoom call or a Teams meeting. That would be all right with this group. When it comes to managing the expectations, if you take a look at the things on this screen, these are really good things to value in other generations. It's work-centric. It's a central part of the baby boomers' identity. There is an emerging need for that flexibility. They've got their own health concerns as well as their family members. Gen X, they want a clear separation between work and life and their personal life. Millennials, they seek to integrate work with their personal life. They want it to be seamless. Gen Z grew up with technology and they expect seamless digital solutions to facilitate their work-life balance. So the expectation of each of these generations reflects a broader societal change in individual experiences. Boomers want to focus on that work ethic, but increasingly seeking flexibility. Gen X values clear boundaries and flexibility, often balancing multiple family responsibilities. Millennials, they want to integrate work with life, seeking purpose. And Gen Z, they want to retain their mental health through support from their employer and maximize flexibility. So how can we retain the talent across the organization and accommodate these diverse expectations? Because it can evolve into some arrangements that might really be impactful for some of these groups. Training and development also looks different to each of the generations. Baby boomers traditionalists also want a classroom, and so do the baby boomers. But baby boomers are becoming more comfortable with the blended approach. Gen X, they would like online courses, webinars, self-paced learning. Millennials, digital learning platform. Let me have it and I will do it, bite-sized pieces. Gen Z, micro learning. That evolves from, think about Twitter, it used to be 140 characters. So we were getting bite-sized pieces, and that has had an impact on how we prefer to learn. And then Gen Z, they want something interactive. video game learning is a big deal. If you can create something that's really attractive, chances are really good you're going to tap into that group right there and they will be really satisfied with what we're providing them. But flexibility is the name of the game. Just let's provide what we can to all of the groups. I know it seems like a lot, doesn't it? There's also a lot to consider when it comes to change management and innovation. If we are proposing a change, it is crucial for us to foster a harmonious and productive work environment by considering some of these areas when it comes to change management. Listen, we can't cater everything to everyone, but we could take a couple of nuggets from each of these areas as we are moving through change. We do have things in common. We've got a lot of things in common, which is interesting because we're hardwired to think about the negative and we don't always consider what we might have in common. But we can see on the following slides what those look like. Safety, respect and professionalism, clear communication, fair compensation and benefits, work-life balance, job security, training and development, feedback and recognition, teamwork and collaboration, ethical conduct, inclusive culture, environmental responsibility, health and wellness, technological support, company mission and vision. That's a lot of things to have in common, y'all. My call to action on this is I encourage those team discussions and workshops to identify and agree upon what some of those common values and practices are on your teams. Begin fostering that environment where every generation does feel heard and valued, paving the way for a dynamic workforce. And how can you do that? You can get into some of these strategies. So these are going to be strategies across the board that you can take one thing and you can implement it today if you choose to. So by fostering this inclusive, supportive environment, maybe even through a grassroots initiative, we can begin addressing many of the challenges posed by this multi-generational workforce. Because as I was describing each of those areas, you could probably hear some of the things that we may have, we might be feeling a little scratchy about with the other generations. But we're going to build that understanding. And one of the first things that you can do is a feedback mechanism. Get a box, physical or digital, and have people anonymously submit their feedback and ideas, and then review the submissions and discussions in team meetings without calling out who gave us that idea. Inclusive culture. Start a weekly team building activity that promotes inclusion, like sharing personal stories, discussing diversity related topics, and then rotate that facilitator among the team members every time that you meet. Learning and development. Share a list of free online courses. I am sure the college has a very great list of items that could be related to professional development. Encourage them to pick one and then set a time to discuss what they learned in a team meeting, like Teach Back. Peer mentorship. Create a sign-up sheet, physically or digitally. Ask employees if they're interested in mentoring or being mentored. Encourage them to participate and pair up based upon mutual interests or skills, or ask them to pair up with someone completely opposite of them because that evokes a different type of experience. Skill sharing workshops. Do a lunch and learn. Take your employee and have them volunteer, but take their employee who has a lot of skill and knowledge and ask them to share it with the group. You can promote it through email or on an office bulletin board. Creating empathy and understanding. Host a storytelling hour where one or two employees share their own journey and experiences, and just make that part of your regular team meetings to build empathy and understanding. Recognition of diverse contributions. Start a kudos corner on a shared platform or in a common place where employees can publicly recognize one another, their colleagues, for their contributions, and encourage everyone to participate. Social and networking events, just maybe have some casual coffee breaks or virtual meetups where it's not about work. It's just about chatting and getting to know one another. Choose a fun theme or an icebreaker, something to spark conversation. Cross-generational collaboration. Assign small tasks or a project to a mixed generational team announce it during a team meeting, and provide a quick overview of the goals and expected outcomes. And finally, the flexible communication. Conduct a brief survey. It could be through email, it could be through a messaging app. Ask the employees how they prefer to connect, and then share the results with the rest of the team so everyone can adopt those. These are simple things that we can implement, even if it's one thing. Implementing these strategies today can help foster a more inclusive, collaborative, and understanding workplace across generations. So I want to give you my quick summary. We have talked a lot about increasing our knowledge of each of the generations, and the challenges, commonalities, and strategies that we have in place. So we went through our agenda and touched on each of these areas.
That concludes the online education. I would like to thank all of our presenters for their experience, knowledge, and expertise. Be sure to subscribe so you're up to date with all of Nebraska Methodist College's continuing education offerings. Thank you.